So we're here to chase some casts, and the first thing I look at is the pore spot. And this pore spot is created by the mold making process, where the two-part mold, it comes together and there's a hole in which they pour the resin material into it to create the cast. And once they pop the mold, they have to cut that section off, and what you have left here is a little round flat indication, which I call the pore spot. Now we have to clean that off, and we want to blend it into the body of the bird. I'm going to take this spiral cut carbide bit, it's called a flame, and use it to chase or grind and shape our little round spot here and blend it into the body. And this is a great bit to do it, because there's enough bite and you're going to get cut through this resin material real fast. Now when you look at the body, I want to make sure that I'm grinding this material down to follow the arc of the belly. So you're going to blend it into the body that's already there. And on this particular bird, there's a lot of definition for feather grouping. And so you can go ahead and cut down into these valleys that are already present and kind of bring them together. So this is already tying it into the shape and flow of the belly feathers. So when you get done tying it all together and blending right into the rest of the feathers that are already present, you have a natural flow right on through where that spot was. Okay, so now we're going to put our fine detail on it. I use a diamond cylinder. This has grit on the end as well as the cylinder, and what I want to do is at a 45-degree angle cut in my feather texturing. I don't use a safe end, because if you have a safe end bit, you're not going to be able to have a loose flowing feel to open up and close splits. A ruby would work just as well, but I prefer diamonds because they last a little bit longer. Alright, so when I do the texturing for the feathers, I start at the bottom feather working up. So I want the lowest most feather, then I come on top of that because I want to take the texture flow and overlap on the feather I've already finished. And the other thing is, when you're cutting these in, you want to go at an arc around. Take a look at the feather texturing that I have on these casts already, and you see they're in arced motion. You want to blend this into what I already have here. So no straight lines. And you also want to make sure you're texturing as tight together as you can. If you have a flat area, when you go to paint it, it might not paint as well. You won't have the texture to help work with you. And so that flat wide area will stand out. And before you know it, you've got it all done. Okay, now what we want to do, we've eliminated our round spot on our bird. Now we're going to take a look at identifying a mold seam line. And the mold seam, because the molds are a two-part mold, when you put the mold together and then they pour the resin, there's a little shift sometimes in that mold. And so the resin firms up, and when you pop that mold out, you get a little line or a little shift in that cast, so that you see a pronounced line or drop from one section to another. And in this case, on the top of this owl's head, we have a real pronounced mold line, and we want to eliminate that. We want to tie this half of the head into the back half of the head. And just so you can see it, I'm going to put a felt marker line on that. And you see some areas it has a real nice blend from one side to the next. But then other areas there'll be that shift. So again, using this diamond crosscut flame works really good. And the first thing we're going to do is get the two halves at the same level, plane. Knock off that ridge. So not only am I eliminating the ridge of the mold line, but I'm also blending into the higher side. I want to take that higher side and lower it a bit so it ties in or flows into the lower side. In this case, the front of the head is lower than the back of the head. And you may get a cast where it's just the other way around. It'll be lower in the back and higher in the front. And you notice my strokes are going with the flow of the feathering. That's already helping to define some of the texturing or the feather grouping that's already in place. Now I would continue to go all the way around this bird wherever I see that mold line. But in this case, we'll just stop right there and go right to the texturing. So you can feel it, and there's no edge to it. Flows right front to back. So for the fine texturing, to put the splits in and the fine texturing back in, I'm using my diamond cylinder, which has the grit on the end as well as the side. I want the grit on the end so that I can create splits and openings as I go in just one pass. If you use a safe end bit, you're not going to be able to push open and create splits and variation in the feathering. So let's go ahead and get started putting in our fine texture. I'll usually start at the bottom part of the bird and work my way up. In the case of the head, I'll start on one side, come around, and then work from the other side and come back up and meet to the center. Because of the way the feathers overlap, I want to make sure I'm doing the lowermost feather first, then do the next feather that lays on top to get that proper flow and overlapping. And be sure to arc your motion so that the feather splits and definition is not straight. You want them arced, just like the actual feathers are. Plus, if you look at the detail on my cast here, you'll see that arcing motion from one feather to the next. And you can also see how quick and easy this is. You don't have to spend a lot of time. Just make sure your feather strokes are pretty close and tight from one another. Then you don't have to go back and redo. And when you go to paint this thing, if you have too wide or too flat areas, the paint won't look so good. All right, there we are. Blended in, no more seam. Now that you've taken care of the pore spot and the mold seams, I take a look at the cast to see if there's any imperfections or bubbles that may exist. And on this particular piece, we have two big air bubbles right here on the breast. Now what I do is I'll use super glue and baking soda. So I'll pour the super glue into the bubble and then tap my baking soda into the super glue. And you'll keep tapping it as long as the super glue will continue to absorb the baking soda. And once the baking soda gets hard, you'll just keep doing layer after layer until that bubble's completely full. Then I'll come back and chase it or clean it up with my carbide crosscut flame and blend it in to the feathering around it, just like what we did with the mold seam and the pore spot. And then I'll come back and texture it, fine texture it with my diamond cylinder. Yes. And that will take care of all the chasing and cleaning up of the cast that you need so it's prepared for painting. On our next piece here, we have a flat bottom. And in this case, when we take a look at the bottom, it's not real flat for us, and we might want to flatten that out. First, I take a look to see if there's a big ridge or imperfection along this edge, because when it's poured into the mold just like this, and the resin's poured down, and so all the bubbles come and rise, as well as a little wicking out to the side on the mold, and so you can end up having a little steep edge out here that you might want to grind off. And if you do have to grind it off, just take your carbide flame, and this one's a cross-cut flame, carbide cutter. And that works real well for getting in there and just first knock off the real hard bump areas that might be protruding. And don't worry about the bubbles in here. Just mainly knock off this edge so that we get closer to a flat plane. And that will do that. And you can take your finger, go along, and see if there's anything that jumps out as far as a major ridge. Alright, now it's ready to flatten. And what I use is a sheet of just any old brand of sandpaper. 100 grit's great. Any coarser than that ends up taking pretty big bites in the bottom. And any finer, you're going to be here all day, and we don't want to be here all day. Set it on your table, flat surface, and I just take the cast from one corner to another, just a few strokes like so. You can take a look and see if you're getting anywhere. Right now, it's still working on this outer edge, and we haven't even touched any of these bubbles yet, so we'll just keep working at it. The other thing you can do is take it out on a belt sander if you have one, and on the belt sander you can just real carefully keep it level with the horizon and just touch down and very carefully make sure that the whole bottom is being sanded down. So we'll just keep going for a little bit, and you know, it may take you a few minutes, but once you take a look, we're pretty much registering the entire surface now, and that's what you want. Now there might be some areas where you haven't touched, but that's okay because the majority of the bottom now is flat, and when you set it on your table, it's good and firm. It's not rocking around, and that's good enough. You're ready to seal it up and paint. Once you cut into the resin material, it actually opens up and starts outgassing, and if you do not reseal it, when you go to paint it, that area will react differently to the paint than it will the rest of the cast. So we need to reseal it, and I use this Deft semi-gloss to do the sealing, and it just needs one coat. I'm going to spray the entire area that you cleaned up or chased with your bits. Now it's okay if you shoot the entire bird, that's fine. In fact, you know, I'll tend to do that just to make sure that I have Deft sealer over the entire surface area so that then the paint can adhere to it without any trouble. You're ready for painting.